Hi, it's Brian Rose, and welcome to London Real. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that you're excited about learning and creating real change. Well, me too. That's why I started broadcasting this show 8 years ago. And over that time, I've learned that change only happens when you take action. Maybe you've been thinking about what steps you could take in order to live a better life, but you're feeling stuck or don't know where to start. I understand, and that's why I created the London Real Academy, to help people take that first step towards everything from starting their own business to recording their first podcast, to speaking publicly, or just to leading a healthier, more productive lifestyle. And today, I'm offering you a free one-to-one phone call with one of my London Real Academy coaches, who can speak with you directly about your personal challenges and how we can help. There is no cost for this and no obligation. So if you're ready to take action, go to londonreal.tv/change or click on the link to book your free coaching call and start your journey today. Now, on to the show.
On the day after Christmas, an American endurance athlete, Colin O'Brady, completed a 54-day solo trek across more than 930 miles of the vastness of Antarctica.
I realized as I'm flying down there that there's actually another very prolific British explorer attempting the exact same goal at the exact same time as me. 24 hours of daylight, no wildlife, no trees, no even bacteria living out there. It's just an endless white desert. For me to survive out there, I would have run out of food if I stopped, so I couldn't take any days off. I need to keep plugging forward one step at a time, remembering that whatever moment we are in our life, it's ultimately temporary. I had no money when I was a kid growing up, but always was like, someday I want to see the world and have some adventures. Ultimately ended up in Thailand, being a foolish 22-year-old kid, and I decided to jump a flaming jump rope. The rope wrapped around my legs, splattered kerosene the length of my body. I tripped on it and ultimately lit my body completely on fire to my neck. You've been an athlete your entire life, that's how you identify yourself. You're never gonna walk again normally. The heroine of the story is my mother came to my bedside and she said, "Colin, your life is not over." What would have happened had my mom not forced my mindset to shift towards overcoming this massive obstacle in my life? And so for the last 10 years of my life have been a constant exploration of the limits of human potential, but sharing that within a way that inspires others, and realize that we have so much inside of us to achieve extraordinary things when we can get our mind right.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go? This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Colin O'Brady is the first man to cross the Antarctic unassisted. 54 days pulling a sled for 1,000 miles. And it was great to sit down and talk to him, but he's not what you'd expect. He looks like the boy next door. He doesn't look like some tough outdoor man, because this adventure was all about getting in touch with your relationship with your own fear and also going deep inside the mind. Colin had no media when he was out there, no music, nothing to read. For 17 hours a day, he was pulling that sled, building camps, and making this crazy adventure, while also knowing he could die at any moment. If he lost his tent to the wind, he would die and freeze. And he was running out of food the entire time, to where his body weight got so low at the end. This is an incredible story about being human, about adventure, about fear, and also going deep into the mind. And I know you're gonna enjoy this episode with Colin O'Brady. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Colin O'Brady, the American professional endurance athlete, motivational speaker, and adventurer. You set 2 all-time records in the Explorers Grand Slam, which saw you climb the 7 highest mountain peaks on each of the 7 continents, as well as trekking to both the North and South Pole in a record 139 days. Last year, you completed the impossible first expedition, becoming the first man in history to cross Antarctica solo and unaided. The journey took 54 days and covered 923 miles of blinding snow and temperatures as low as minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Colin, welcome to London Real.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you too. Before we get started, what's it like being in London? How does this compare to all the crazy places you've been to?
I love London. It's been a few years since I've been here, but I was here for the London Olympics. It was my last time in London, which was a treat. I've been a big fan of the Olympics since I was a little kid, so it was fun to see it here. I was racing triathlon professionally at that time, and so seeing some of my countrymen race in the London Triathlon in Hyde Park was amazing. And I love London. It's a great place.
And you just got back from Scotland,
Yep.
doing some climbing up in the Highlands. What's that like? Because you climbed all around the world.
Yes, I climbed Ben Nevis yesterday, the summit of the tallest mountain in all of the UK, I'm told, 4,310 feet.
Okay.
So, lower than the city of Denver. But so it's not exactly a huge peak. But no, it's the UK is a beautiful country. Certainly Scotland and the Highlands is beautiful, albeit very rainy and kind of miserable and dreary at times. It was enjoyable for sure.
Do you feel like you kind of connect with the land when you do a climb like that? I mean, do you get a feel for kind of the place or the space or the people when you go climb in different places?
Yeah, for me, I love being outside and, exploring nature and the outdoors. For me, obviously, some of my more, bigger expeditions to, Everest or Denali or, crossing Antarctica or, big epic adventures that I've done are amazing. But I also love, just wherever I am, being outside and exploring the natural landscape. So, of course, climbing Ben Nevis in Scotland is more or less a day hike, but it's beautiful to be out there and experience the countryside and see, the natural landscape of any place. I love to do that no matter where I am.
Right, and everything's a little different, right? There's always
Absolutely.
something that kind of feels different, looks different. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was up in Snowdon a couple weeks ago, which is like Wales, but not far, and it was really interesting being up there. Like I had never been to Wales. I'd never been to a high mountain in the UK because there's not many.
Yeah.
But it was good. I felt like I'm a little more connected to this island now.
Yeah.
So
Fantastic.
I want to talk about these adventures, but I heard you say something that I wanted to talk about first, and that's the fact that for you, these aren't necessarily athletic endeavors, but this is more of an art form for you and more of a way for you to tell a story. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was wondering if you could kind of expand. Have you always had that philosophy when it came to some of your physical feats, or is it something that evolved over time?
It's been an evolution for me. I've been a professional athlete for a number of years, and all growing up, I was a swimmer and ultimately a collegiate swimmer in the United States. Nationally ranked athlete, professional triathlete, now at least world records in the outdoors. And for many years of my life, most of my life, I think I've identified as myself as an athlete, a professional athlete, or elite athlete, or whatever you want to call that. And it was a few years ago that I kind of had a bit of a mindset shift. Ultimately, that kind of moment in time, at least I can place it in a moment, would be actually at Burning Man, which I imagine you're familiar with.
I'm familiar with that. I haven't been.
But highly recommend going. Burning Man, big art festival in the desert of Nevada, all sorts of different, things on display out there. But at its core, it's really about art and art installations. And for me, I, never thought of myself as a creative. I always thought, I've appreciated art, but wasn't like the biggest fan. I think, art's something you hang on your wall and you look at, and that's nice or whatever. But it wasn't, deeply fascinated by art in, I guess, the way that I framed it in my mind at that moment.
Plus in school, you're usually the athlete or the scientist,
exactly,
or the artist.
Exactly.
Right?
So I was athlete, and then, I studied economics, so it was kind of more business driven. This kind of didn't, the word art didn't exactly, not that I had anything against it, just didn't how I personally identified. And, being out in the desert and seeing basically at Burning Man, there's all these huge art installations, basically these big art pieces, sculptures and things, but they're meant to be interacted with. You're actually about to, play on them or climb on them or swing from them, not just sit there and view them. And they're also ephemeral in the sense that most of them at the end of the week are burnt to the ground. And so there's, people may spend all year or years ultimately working on this big piece to have it there for a week and then just kind of it just disappears. And there was something about my experience being there and looking at these art pieces that I realized, like, what I'm doing in the world by doing these expeditions is my own personal creative artistic expression. And I started thinking of myself more as an artist. And yes, my canvas happens to be endurance sports or breaking world records in the outdoors or what that is. But through storytelling and ultimately the ripple effect of positivity and inspiration that can be, raised from that storytelling, that is ultimately the art. And so for me, it has become less and less about being the man in the arena, like, hey, watch me break this world record because I'm awesome. That's really pretty simple, and could care less about that. It's like, hey, I'm curious about pushing the limits of human potential in interesting and unique ways. And I share that with the world, not so I can get pat on the back or have my name on, newspaper or something like that, but it's so that other people can watch that and take that into their own lives. So my best piece of feedback that I receive from people that, write to me on Instagram or send me notes or emails or whatever that is not like, wow, Colin, your world record project in Antarctica was extraordinary. People said it was impossible and you did this amazing thing. It's, I watch that every single day through your social media, and now I'm starting that business that I always thought I couldn't start, or I'm taking this leap of faith in my relationship and diving in deeper with love, or I'm creating whatever that is, or I'm going through this incredibly hard time. My mother was just diagnosed with cancer and I'm really struggling, but you've given me the strength to persevere in the face of really tough tragedy in my personal life, whatever it is. That to me is what I try to put out in the world, and ultimately what I think we can all do as humans by sharing our stories and having that sort of resonant positivity. And so for me, because of that, I've reframed what I do, to be more of an artist than just a pure athlete.
Right, which means the story is as important as the feat to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's the way in which that we can share and learn from one another. Certainly my, athletic accomplishments, what I just did in Antarctica, the first person to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported and unaided, the first word in that is solo, alone. I was out there alone in Antarctica for 1,000 miles pulling a 375-pound sled. Many people have attempted that over time. No one had been successful until I did it. But the word solo in some sense is a misnomer because yes, I was completely solo. I wasn't aided by anybody else. But me being there was a addition of all of these different experiences and inspirations and other people's stories that I had brought to inside of myself to be there. And so to your point about sort of the story is greater than the feat is like, yes, like I'm a component of all of the other people's stories that came before me. I have great deference and reverence for the 100 years of history and polar exploration. And I've written some things that I post on Instagram and stuff like that called "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants," which is people like, wow, you finally cracked this impossible code and you made this crossing of Antarctica. And I was like, yes, I did, but I did so because of the people that came before me and their attempts and their daring and their just these extraordinary things that people have done. And so I think that that's true of wherever you are, whatever sort of your medium is in life, is that you've learned from others, you've been inspired from others along the way. And as humans, I think we almost have a responsibility to share our stories, not again so we can beat our chest and say, hey, look at me, but for the opposite, which is you never know the impact you're having in a positive way on others and their other people's growth, because that's certainly been my path in observing others and learning from other people.
Yeah, and we really connect to stories. So I know when you talk about your story, and I want to hear about it, but that when you got dropped there the first time in Antarctica, that first hour was like a shock to you.
Yeah.
And when you tell that story to people, they get drawn in, right? Because if you just said, yeah, I did it, it was awesome, I'm great, it was easy.
Right.
Then honestly, it's less interesting to another human being. But if we can actually go through the whole process of what it was like in your mind and what the struggle was like and what we can take from it, then it becomes something useful. Right?
100%, yeah, and I think, probably goes back, I don't know the full psychology, but, thousands of years, not tens of thousands of years, and the caveman and the way that we interacted, I think probably is deep in our DNA through storytelling and oral history and things like that. I think that, I mentioned the Olympics before. I love the Olympics and always have when I was a kid, but of course I don't, know everything about every Olympic sport, like, fencing or curling or, Greco-Roman wrestling or something like that. But I think that a lot of the Olympic coverage on television, at least when I was a kid up until now, does a great job of captivating it through storytelling. So it's one thing if I was to show like, this is the Olympic final of the fencing competition. I don't know anything about it and be like, cool, that guy won a gold medal, I guess. I don't know how the rules, I don't know how this, right? But if, NBC puts up right before that comes on, this 5-minute story, this backstory of like, here's this guy from this rural village in Romania and this is what he did, the struggle to go through of getting there, and here's his family and these things he overcame and all this sort of stuff. as a human, now I'm engaged in the human elements of this. And so when he's out there with his sword, I'm like, I don't know what he's doing, but like I'm on the edge of my seat cheering for this guy because I'm connected through the story of the personal struggle or the personal sort of journey to get to that moment of glory on the Olympic stage. And so to me, that's just one tiny example. There's a million examples like that, but the power of storytelling to engage the heart and souls of the audience
Yeah, it's so powerful. I'm thinking of a mutual friend of ours, Rich Roll, and people ask Rich, and he did the Ultraman in Hawaii, and then did the 5 Ironman and 5 islands. But you ask him, and he's like, I came in 5th. He's like, I'm not this great athlete, but people love him because he's got the story. He was an alcoholic, and he came back, and then he changed his diet, and then in his 40s he became this guy, and it's the story. It's actually not the accomplishment, is it? That inspires people.
Yeah, and I think it's also the vessel for delivering that. I mean, I love Rich. He's a dear friend of mine. I've been on his podcast a few times, and I was with him last week. We were doing this event called 29 where you climb this ski mountain. We can talk more about that, but it's a cool event that I put on. But he is such an extraordinary human being. His story is amazing, and his way of actually sharing that story in such a humble and positive way with the world is amazing, and that's why you're drawn to him. And the guy that came in maybe 4th place ahead of him or 3rd place ahead of him, might not have that sort of same sort of captivating resonance or energy. And I think it's Rich is honest as well as also very humble in the way that he shares that. His accomplishments are extraordinary, and what he's done as an athlete are amazing. But he's also the first to point out, like, hey, like I'm not like the best in the world at the thing that I do, but his story of getting there and what he went through and overcame, certainly through alcoholism and changing his diet and plant-based diet and his spiritual growth and all that, is really, really captivating, and it's told in a way that's extraordinary.
Yeah, and he's a great writer, and so when he tells the story, it connects.
Absolutely.
If he doesn't tell you that, then you would never know. So
100%.
It's super important. You talk about this journey, and I want to talk about it, obviously, going across Antarctica, but you also talk a lot about the journey into your mind.
Yep.
Because, of course, you're solo, so I guess we would expect that. But you're also, your whole life has been about going into your mind. And I think I was surprised a bit once I know more about you. And maybe are people surprised when they find out that what you do is very cerebral as opposed to physical?
I think that there's an interesting, we have these archetypes in our mind of, the world-class athlete, and, whether it's true or not, and I think that's probably not true in a lot of cases, but we think of like, the biggest, strongest guy in the room, maybe a lot of sort of masculine energy of like machismo. It's like, you're a fucking badass and you went out there, and pulled a sled 375 miles, like you must be super hardcore. And oftentimes when people meet me, it's funny, I get like some responses and it's like they're trying to figure out a way to say this nice. They're like, you're like a normal height, normal build, like relatively soft-spoken, they're trying to say like you're not the meathead that I expected you might be, basically. And I think that ultimately to crack this challenge, which yes, it is extraordinarily physically demanding, to be able to pull a 375-pound sled consecutively over 1,000 miles in the harshest climate in the world, like obviously takes some intense physical capacity. But there's no way you're doing that without mastering the mind, because what's so challenging about Antarctica is, yes, it's solitude, but you've also got 24 hours of daylight, so it's daylight. There's nothing living out there. So on the interior of Antarctica, you've got no wildlife, no trees, no even bacteria living out there. It's just an endless white desert. It's actually a desert. People don't think of Antarctica that way, but it's actually the largest desert in the world. And with the 24 hours of daylight, you either got all this expansive white that's endless, or most of the time you've got high winds and snow blowing around. So you've got this really interior experience where you've got, 50, 60 mile per hour winds, minus 80-degree wind chill, and you're out there alone with nothing to see and no light even changing on the horizon. So where does your mind go when it's just blank, empty white spaces for 54 days? Yes, do you need to be physically capable to pull that sled? Absolutely. But most people, if they didn't, if I say the most important muscle that any of us has is the 6 inches between our ears. And if we don't flex and develop that, then none of the rest matters. And that's certainly true for something like this Antarctica project, where ultimately, yes, I had to have the physical tools, but if the mental broke down at any point out there, it's game over.
Right. So how do you mentally prepare for something like that?
For me, it's not like I had this Antarctica project, circled on my life bucket list calendar for decades. It's something I've been thinking about for a few years, and certainly spent, a good year or so planning, in the build up to it. I did it this past year, so I, spent all of 2018, building up towards it. But before that, Vipassana meditation is something that's actually been a huge part for me. So I was a professional triathlete in between 2009 and 2015. And early in my triathlon career, a friend of mine, his wife, came and watched me race a triathlon. This Turkish woman named Ece, and she comes up to me after the race and she says, I'm not a sports fan at all. I'm only here because Zach wanted me to come see your race. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was just getting to know her at the time. And she's like, but I see that clearly all of you professional athletes, it's such a mental struggle out here as you guys are swimming and biking and running, the best athletes in the world in endurance sports really competing head to head. It's just this mental intense struggle. And she's like, I can see that on your faces. She just asked me like point blank, so what are you doing to develop your mind? And I gave her some kind of like rudimentary answer, like, oh, well, like I've done some visualization stuff and I work on mental toughness in my training, whatever. She's like, no, but like really, like what are you doing? Like what is your actual discipline practice for doing that? And I didn't have a good answer. And I was like, I was kind of embarrassed. And I was like, well, do you have a recommendation? And she was like, I would recommend this Vipassana meditation that I've been doing for years. And I was like, great, tell me about it. Like, what do I do? And she was like, there's these 10-day silent meditation retreats. It's 10 days you go, no reading, no writing, no eye contact. You meditate for 12 plus hours a day. And the rest of the time you're basically in complete isolation. She's like, it's extraordinarily hard, but it teaches you the methodology for taking that into your daily life and actually practicing how to develop your mind and your self-awareness of your body. And I had never meditated a minute before in my life. I was raised in a very sort of liberal environment. I was born in a hippie commune at home with Bob Marley Redemption song playing on repeat. So I was open to these sort of ideas, but I just had never really practiced that in any meaningful way. And I said, great, this off season I'm going. And so the end of that year, when I, a few weeks break from training my body and racing, I went and did my first 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat. And the first couple hours, you're sitting there going like, what have I got myself into? But ultimately, although very challenging, was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life and taught me so much. And it's something that I've now gone back and done repeated, several times. I try to go back, every year if I can, or every other year. But more than anything, the 10-day deep dive is immersive, and the experience of itself of those 10 days is really profound. But ultimately what it teaches you is how to incorporate that into your daily life. And I think that when we think about mental preparation, at least from my point of view, it's very easy to be like, I need to get stronger upper body, so I should do bicep curls and bench press, and I should go to the gym. That's a very common understanding. I want to get stronger, I should work out. But we think, I want to have a stronger mind. But then for some reason, there's this disconnect of like, great, so you need to work on that every single day, the same way you would on working on any other type of muscle. So for me, has been Vipassana meditation, a deep immersion into that, and then taking that into a daily practice. It doesn't necessarily have to be Vipassana meditation, although I would highly recommend it. It's completely free to go. I'd recommend it to anybody out there. There's 275 centers around the world. You can find one near you. But whether it's that or something else, mental toughness, mental acuity, mental strength grows from actually taking intentional practice towards building that. So like I said, the 6 inches between the ears, if you want to develop this muscle, you actually have to build it in the gym, effectively the gym, in some capacity, intentionally, the same way you would if you were trying to get your upper body stronger or whatnot. And I think that is a piece that oftentimes people miss.
Can you tell us what some of the struggles were on the 10 days of Vipassana? Like what were some of the
I think there's a couple pieces in the Vipassana I think are really challenging. Obviously the solitude. It's something, that was my first 10 days was my first experience. You start going back through your life and you're going, have I ever spent a whole day since I've been able to speak not speaking? And for most people, the answer is no. Like, well, what context would that exist in? Maybe you had some days where you spent most of the time by yourself, but you probably spoke to somebody or picked up the phone or whatever. So just that is disorienting. That just breaks your normal structure. But I think the biggest challenge, which I didn't really anticipate at the time, but has also probably given me the best results in terms of sort of, I guess, athletic stuff, although the athletic piece of this, interestingly enough, I went there to become more mentally strong so that my athletic, pursuits could be greater. And that has certainly been a byproduct, but there's probably 10 other things more valuable than just in my interpersonal life and things that are even more valuable than the gains there. Okay. But the gains there have been significant. But the thing that I think is the most challenging is actually how hard it is to sit still. And so the way the Vipassana course is structured, basically there's specific times when you're meditating in the hall with other people, though you're not talking to anybody, everyone's there at the same time. And then there's times when you're meditating kind of in your own, room, or a very small basic room with a mattress, and basically on your own a little bit. But in the times in the hall, there's these 3 1-hour periods per day, which are called the sittings of strong determination. And so what you do is you sit down, on the floor on a meditation pillow, and you can put something under your knees. You can, kind of get, kneel, whatever comfortable position you might start in. And you sit there, and basically the 1 hour starts with a little bit of chanting, and then it's dead silent, and then the chanting will start at the end of the hour. And what's explicitly told to you is the only thing you can do right now is you cannot change your posture from where you started. Which seems simple. Oh, I can start in a comfortable position, I should be fine. But I don't care how comfortable of a position you start in. If you don't move and change your posture at all for an hour, you're gonna start feeling pretty intense sensations on your body. Before you know it, you're like, oh my God, my knee hurts because I'm sitting cross-legged, or my back hurts, or my neck hurts, or whatever that is. In the sitting of strong determination, what you're supposed to do is observe the sensation on the body objectively. To go normally, you're like, okay, my knee hurts. And what we do in our brain is we go, my knee hurts, I should move my leg. That's the initial thought. And you're obviously not trying to injure yourself. If you actually injure yourself, stop. But your knee hurts. But what the meditation practice teaches you within the stillness is to sit there and just observe it and go, oh, I'm feeling the sensation of pain. But do I have to let that become suffering? The pain is mandatory, but I say the suffering is optional. You don't actually have to equate that to negativity and then rising anxiety and then fear. And what if the pain never goes away? All the things that you can sort of fear loop in your brain, right? You can sit there and just go, oh, I'm feeling a sensation of pain in my knee. And if you sit there long enough, what's crazy and what the meditation practice teaches you is it goes away. It's ephemeral. And one of the great mantras, which is of course well used in all sorts of Buddhist meditation, is this too shall pass. This too shall pass. And as you observe that sensation on the body coming and going, you realize you don't have to put so much attention or focus into the negativity or the positivity. The same thing happens in the meditation practice is actually you get into this beautiful flow sensations. There's times when there's sort of a beautiful kind of euphoric, at peace moment. And the other thing is to observe that and go, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. So to remember that the pain in the knee or the back is the same as the euphoric feeling, and this too shall pass. That part is exceptionally challenging, but then you apply that to day-to-day life, which is, say you're starting a business and, being an entrepreneur is super hard, right? All of a sudden you've got, all these different things you're accountable for. You're trying to make payroll, this person, this funding's not coming in, all the things are stacking up. You feel like you're in the middle of the eye of the storm. And if in that moment you can say to yourself, this is intense, this is super hard, I need to keep plugging forward one step at a time, but this too shall pass. It's the same thing, remembering that whatever moment we are in our life, it's ultimately temporary. Because our fear is often, this is gonna last forever, this struggle, this strain, this pain, this, oh my God. Or it's the same thing, you're running in a marathon or you're climbing a mountain and you're completely exhausted. And it's easy to be maybe I should quit. But instead you go if I just keep running, I'm gonna finish this race and then it's gonna be over and then I'm gonna be sitting at my house with my feet up and I'm gonna feel a lot more satisfied giving it my all right now than having given up because this feels like it's gonna last forever and my heart rate's gonna be 200 forever, I'm never gonna recover. It's it's gonna pass. You can get through it. So I think that's been probably one of the more powerful takeaways for me.
And did that help your triathlon training afterwards? By having some of that knowledge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's helped in my triathlon training. It certainly helped in other pieces of, intense moments my 7 Summits World Record project, I'm climbing Everest, I'm stuck out in a massive storm, I'm getting beat up out there, all this kind of stuff. Or, when I'm crossing Antarctica, there were some storms that lasted 8, 9, 10 days. And when I say, lasted, I'm saying for me to survive out there, I would have run out of food if I stopped, so I couldn't take any days off. I'm pulling this 375-pound sled. It's getting slightly lighter as I go, and I eat my food, but it's still extraordinarily heavy as I go. And I'm pulling a sled 12 plus hours per day. That's the minimum. I also have 5 hours of chores on either side of that. So setting up my tent, melting water, eating food, all these different things. So it's 17-hour days, basically, and I can't take a day off. If I take a day off, I'm gonna run out of food. I actually was down to my last bite of food the second I finished as it was without taking any days off. And so you wake up 50, 60 mile per hour winds are blowing outside of your tent. It's gonna basically knock you over. Minus 80 degree wind chill. You can get frostbite in minutes if you have any exposed skin. And you're telling yourself like, I have to go out in that for the next 12 hours. But if you can tell yourself in your mind, like, this ultimately is temporary. 1 minute of that, if I warped you there right now, even if I warped myself out there right now, because like I've been inside for a while and I'm not completely acclimatized to that environment, I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm gonna die, like, But I got to a place in my mind where I could accept that like, this is a storm. I am in Antarctica. I have chosen to be here. I knew this was gonna be challenging. And you know what? Like, this storm will not last forever. No storm does, right. Metaphorically or, in the real world. Like, no storm lasts forever. This too shall pass. And that's been very powerful for me to get through some of my hardest times, as well as I don't belittle the other side of that, which is big accomplishments I've had, mountaintops I've stood on, all these types of things. Like, I've also remind myself to say in those moments, like, yeah, this too shall pass too. And it's not to not celebrate the moment and be like so proud and so excited when you accomplish something, but to also realize like, this moment's temporary. Enjoy the heck out of it. Embrace this moment, but realize at some point it'd be like ready to get right back into it, back to work, keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get to those big peaks in life and then they realize they're so fleeting, and that can be really depressing.
Totally.
So like, wow, I tried everything for this and then now I'm here and this sucks. You know, and it's probably because, they're not taking that in stride as well.
And that's, obviously it's a well-worn trope in some regard, but that's the point when you realize like, it's the journey, it's not the destination. Like, yes, the completion of this Antarctica crossing, was amazing, but did I do it all because of the final moment when I took the final step and like, I'm the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, unassisted? Like, no, like ultimately it was the personal growth and the profound insight that I gained from looking inward over the course of 54 days and the year plus in the planning. And my wife, Jenna, is really involved in the creation of all of these things. And it's our art and our creativity and the storytelling and the resonant positivity, and a note I get from somebody a year later that tells me about them following this and the impact it had on them, right? It's like, that's actually what it's about. It wasn't actually about the destination, but we can be so focused on the destination to not realize that the actual growth or the beauty of it is the process within we get there.
Yeah, and it's easy as humans to get fixated on the accomplishment. That's what people first.
Of course.
On your Wikipedia page is, oh, this guy that did this.
He's done this, and this. Yeah.
But no, this resonates a lot because last year I did that half Ironman, and Rich Roll said the same thing to me. He said, Brian, when you're out there and something's hurting, it's important to realize that that's not going to last forever. And so that's one of the biggest things I learned about when I trained endurance is that just keep rolling. So there'll be highs and lows, and just to realize that it's not going to last forever, which is hard sometimes.
Of course.
When you're there. And then also to know that your brain is also playing some funny tricks on you as well. So I used to go out for my half marathon on Saturdays, and like 4 kilometers in, it might be like, oh, your knee hurts. Oh, if you get injured, you can't run the thing. Maybe we should take it easy. And it's like, no, you're just fucking with me.
Yeah.
You're lying to me. Yeah. And then two kilos later, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, did you have enough nutrition? Maybe you didn't. And then it's this little game. You're
bargaining with yourself in your mind.
Bargaining.
Constantly.
Just realize no bargain. There's no bargain. And so that's a fun exploration, but also growth. And to know that once I can do that, I can try to apply that in other places.
100%.
So, all right, can we talk about the expedition?
Yeah.
Because like you said, it wasn't this crazy thing on the bucket list, but it did come up into your sphere of like, okay, I can do this. It also happened at the same time when someone else was going to do it, which is a really weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just talk about kind of the year leading up to that and then that first hour.
Yeah, 100%. So, where to start? I guess a little bit of context would be, I had between 2009 and 2015, I had been racing triathlon professionally. I'm going to back up actually. We're going to go back a little bit further because I think it's an important context. So in 2008, I had graduated from college, going to work in finance, similar to you.
Oh yeah, commodities broker in Chicago.
Going to be a commodities trader in Chicago.
You did a bit of
economics
that.
degree. Did that for a brief period of time. But I I'd always also dreamed of seeing a bit of the world. I kind of had this adventurous spirit inside of me. Had no money when I was a kid growing up, but always was like, someday I want to see the world and have some adventures, which I think is probably, it's like backing up here because it's derivative of like these, big adventures that I've ultimately had in my life. I had no idea I was going to get there, but I painted houses when I was a kid, like every summer, and every summer I'd sock away like $1,000 and be like, when I graduate from college, I'm going to have this kind of like, piggy bank of a few $1,000s, and I'm going to go see the world. And ultimately graduated from college and had about $10,000 saved up, and I was like, I'm gonna travel for as long as I can, backpack, surfboard, youth hostels, hitchhiking, whatever that might be. It was an extraordinary experience, living life on as cheap as I possibly could, sleeping on floors and hitchhiking and whatnot, but really experiencing the world outside the United States for the first time. Amazing experience, Fiji, Australia, New Zealand, a bunch of places. Ultimately ended up in Thailand, and kind of tragedy really befell me there. I was being a foolish 22-year-old kid, and I decided to jump a flaming jump rope.
And on your own, or they were doing it?
Like on a big right. Jump rope.
Which is like a thing there, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. You can Google it. You can see all these crazy, drunk tourists doing this. And, I believe it or not, most of that trip I was drinking and partying, but actually that night I was sober, thank God, probably saved my life. But the rope wrapped around my legs, splattered kerosene the length of my body. I tripped on it and ultimately lit my body completely on fire to my neck. And I jumped in the ocean to extinguish the flames, which ultimately saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned. And, it obviously led to a really, dramatic set of circumstances in my life. One, I was in a tiny little island in Thailand, no proper medical facilities. I had a moped ride down a dirt path to a one-room nursing station. There was a cat running around my bed and across my chest in this makeshift ICU. And the biggest thing is the doctors looked at me and they said, through their broken English in this small little like rural hut, basically, they're like, look, you'll never walk again normally. Like, you're never gonna walk again normally. Your legs are too badly burned. And they thought the ligaments were damaged and things like that. And it was just this moment of, kind of depth of despair moment. The physical trauma was immense. I mean, I just burned the skin off of 25% of my body. I mean, you see some of the pictures, it's like you can barely look at them. It's brutal. But more important,
how do you deal with the pain at that point? You have salt water in your wounds as well.
Yeah, salt water in the wounds. I mean, it's just the physical pain is extraordinary. But on top of all of that, you've got somebody laying basically the heaviest hammer of emotional trauma on you, which is like, hey kid, you've been an athlete your entire life. That's how you identify yourself. Well, forget that for now. You're never gonna walk again normally. And so just the emotional weight of that, like I'll never forget about that. And just the downward spiral, just the immediate downward spiral of negativity. And remember, we were talking a lot about mindset here, of just negativity. It's like, my life as I know it's over. Who am I without, the ability to walk? Like all these sort of things. And then just screaming, pain on my legs. And, kind of the heroine of the story is my mother. And this will somehow full circle well to get back to Antarctica. But to me, this is just such a transitional moment in my life, really dictate a lot of things that happened to me in the future after that, which is my mother came to my bedside and she said, Colin, your life is not over. And, I give a lot of credit to my mother. She's extraordinary, but instead of her kind of wallowing in her own stars, her own fear, here's just a mother on the other side of the world seeing her kid in this entirely, no one would blame her for being freaked out. And, she admits now that she was. But she never showed me that fear. Instead, she came into my hospital room every single day with this smile on her face and this air of positivity, being like, Colin, let's dream about the future. What do you want to do when you get over? You're 22 years old. Like, you've got a whole life in front of you. Like, dream, like anything. What is it? Close your eyes, visualize something. And I was like, what are you talking about, Mom? Like, life as I know it's over. But sure enough, I closed my eyes and I pictured myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon, which is not something I'd ever done before in my life, but it was just this in my mind of, an able-bodied, strong, fit person being able to do. And I opened my eyes and said, Mom, one day I'm gonna race a triathlon. And instead of her being like, hey, I said set a goal, but maybe something a little more in the realm of realistic, she was like, cool, let's do it. So for the next, 3 months in the hospital, didn't take a single step. I was training and I was flown back to the United States. I was carried on and off the plane, placed in a wheelchair when I got home back to Portland, Oregon. I'm in this wheelchair. My mom takes a chair from our kitchen table and placed it one step in front of my wheelchair. She goes, all right, you haven't taken a step in 3 months. Today's the day you're gonna take your very first step. Figure out how to get out of your wheelchair and take one step in the chair in front of you. And that was literally the first step on the road to recovery. Long story short, 18 months after being burned in this fire in Thailand, I moved to Chicago, take a job in commodities trading, but honor this goal of racing this triathlon. I'd gotten back on my feet, able to kind of walk around and move around enough, train for this triathlon at this local gym, and race the Chicago Triathlon, an Olympic distance triathlon. And I finished the race, kind of honoring this goal for myself. But to my complete and utter surprise, I hadn't actually just finished the race, but I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of 4,000 or 5,000 other participants on the day. And it was just this bizarre moment in my life, but that's ultimately, this was in 2009, so it's over 10 years ago now. It dictated everything that's come next. It of course, culminates in what I most recently did in Antarctica, which is this moment where I didn't sit there and pat myself on the back and say like, wow, Colin, you're a superhuman athlete. You're awesome, so cool. It was the opposite of that. It was my mind. I immediately went back to the Thai hospital wondering what would have happened had my mom not forced me to set a measurable goal and look towards the future. Or more simply put, what would have happened had my mom not forced my mindset to shift towards this positive outcome with this laser sharp focus on getting, overcoming this massive obstacle in my life. And it was in that moment that I started to realize, not myself, but all of us as humans, that we have these reservoirs of untapped potential inside of us to achieve extraordinary things when we can get our mind right, when we can focus on the outcomes that we want, when we can realize that we can overcome all of these seemingly insurmountable obstacles in our life. And so for the last 10 years of my life, through professional triathlon, through World Records and Explorers Grand Slam, through the 7 Summits World Record, through the 50 High, other things I've done, have been a constant exploration of the limits of human potential in my own canvas, which is endurance sports, but sharing that within a way that inspires others to take that in their own life, whatever their medium is, love, creativity, entrepreneurship, art, whatever that is, and realize that we have so much inside of us, so much inner strength, all of us as humans to do that. And that's really been what my full exploration has been about. And, to answer your initial question about Antarctica, that brought me, as I had that mindset shift around art and creativity, these other world records I had done, which I'm extraordinarily proud of, they had all been speed records. So it was, climbing the 7 summits or doing the Explorers Grand Slam. It's a 7 summits, tallest mountain in each of the 7 continents, plus the North and South Pole, cumulatively faster than anyone has ever done that before. Or I climbed the tallest mountain in each of the 50 US states, all 50 in 21 days. The previous record had been 42. So it's a speed record. Right. But a true artist, I believe, would create something fully unique, not just repeating what someone else has done, but faster. But the true sort of deeper curiosity became for me, which is a world first, stepping into the unknown of something that's never even been done. Forget the time frame of it's been done, but it's actually just physically never been done. And so this crossing, this solo, unsupported, unaided crossing of Antarctica remained unconquered in the world of exploration, although it has a sort of 100-year plus history of people trying it in different forms. And people have crossed Antarctica, using the use of kites or dogs or other sort of aids or having supply drops along the way, but never in this super pure form. And so as the shift toward artistic creativity, it was that would be wholly unique to take this step into the unknown, essentially this blank canvas, and paint on it in a way that no one has ever done before. And that's when myself and all credit where credit's due to my wife, Jenna. I mean, this is her full-time pursuit and passion as well. She's not out there, walking the miles in Antarctica, but certainly taking an idea as audacious to that, we write it on a whiteboard and actually turning that into reality, raising the money, the funding, the logistics, the permitting, the gear, the test. I mean, the list is, years long worth of, lists and processes to get to that place. And she's, right there beside me in the building and the planning and the creation of all of these. As well as the sharing of that. We have a nonprofit that's all around inspiring kids to get outside, move their bodies with active health, involved in all of that. But I get there and I'm leaving for Antarctica, and this is apropos to be telling this story in England. I realize as I'm flying down there that there's actually another very prolific British explorer attempting the exact same goal at the exact same time as me, to cross Antarctica solo. And when I say the same time, I don't mean like, oh, roughly around the same time, we might be out there like roughly at the same time as one another. I mean, there's one company that has one plane that can drop you off in Antarctica. There's only one season for which this can happen. So the nuts and bolts of that is me and this guy. His name is Captain Lou Rudd, a very exceptional guy. I actually hung out with him this morning, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
We're still friends. Are jammed together in this tiny little cargo plane flying to the edge of Antarctica, both of us not now only racing history to this historic thing that no one's been able to do. And a little bit of context, a couple years previously, a guy made it 900 miles and died just 100 miles from the finish line.
Wow.
The year after that, a guy attempted it, ran out of food and had to be evacuated. I mean, people have tried and failed, and paid the ultimate price in attempting this. So the stakes are really high. And now all of a sudden we're like, wait, I'm not just racing history, like I'm literally racing you. And I look over beside me and who is it? It's not like some, unintimidating guy. This guy's a 33-year military veteran in the UK. He's served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kosovo, not to mention he's actually crossed more miles in Antarctica on large expeditions than any living explorer. I mean, this guy is a grizzled polar veteran and he's staring at me kind of like, what business do you have being down here, basically?
When did you find out he was doing it as well?
So I actually knew about him for several months ahead of time because he had announced his project ahead of time. I had been working on it that entire time, even when he announced it, and was like surprised that he was also doing it, but knew about it. I didn't announce my project until a few days before I left to kind of a strategic advantage. Okay. But initially it looked like we might be doing slightly different routes from one another, but we realized when we got down there and met is actually we were asking to be dropped off at the same point, the same time, the same day, the same everything. And so that was became real for both of us, kind of in that, basically that day. And what the agreed, is essentially 1,000 miles, just short of 1,000 miles to make this crossing. So it's from the Ron ice shelf via the South Pole to the other ice shelf, the Ross ice shelf. And the plane decides to make it fair that they're going to drop us off 1 mile equidistant from each other, equidistant to the first waypoint. So I've got this GPS markings on my, markings on my GPS. That's this waypoints along the way. And the first waypoint we're equidistant. So literally, plane drops me off, chuck me out of the plane. I'm standing there at minus 25 degrees and the plane doesn't even take off. It just drives a mile and he gets out and it's, blank, empty white space. I can see him. He's just right there. He's a mile away. I could practically yell over to him. He's not far. We're equidistant starting 1,000-mile race across Antarctica, ready, go. And it's this crazy feeling. And I thought I had prepared really well. The first thing I do is I lean down to kind of check my sled to tighten the straps. And the big thing is the reason the sled is so heavy is because, maybe this is clear, but there's no resupplies of food or fuel. And so you need to take as much food as you possibly can to get across. And the guy the year previous had been evacuated because he actually ran out of food. And so it's this weird calculus. If you carried 1,000 pounds of food, you would never be able to pull your sled. Right. So you're trying to cut it, can I have just enough, but that I can still pull my sled, but enough that I don't run out of food, and die or starve on the other side of the continent. So it's this weird, thing. And obviously Lou and I had strategized slightly differently from one another. It became clear that he had maybe a bit of a lighter sled and slightly different, maybe better strategy given his experience. So I leaned down to tighten the straps of my, bulging sled. And in 1 second, the clip breaks. Ping, clip breaks. I haven't even moved anywhere and stuff's already breaking on my sled because it's too cold and fragile for them. I'm this is gonna be the longest journey ever. I'm okay, calm down. Same thing. Calm. I told you about meditation. I'm not a Buddha. I'm not right. Perfectly always crystal calm in my mind. I'm trying to take a deep breath. Okay, it's gonna be fine. Whatever. And so I strap into my sled. So I've got this harness that goes over my shoulders and a rope attaching my sled, and I have to pull it. And inside. And
then skis?
Skis, yeah.
So cross-country skis.
Cross-country skis, but with skins on the bottom. So they're basically there so you don't fall into crevasses, so it disperses your weight across the snow, and also so you don't sink down in the snow. Okay. It's actually a slightly uphill all the way to the South Pole. So there's no glide. You're pulling a 307-pound sled. It's essentially like walking in glorified snowshoes. You're walking. You're slowly plodding along. Okay. But it gives you enough of a kind of surface area purchase on the snow. Okay. And the skins themselves track to the bottom of the ice. So anyways, I go along, and the first hour, I can't pull my sled barely. I can barely move it. It's too heavy. And so what happens? I start crying But what happens when you start crying and it's minus 25 degrees outside? The tears, they start freezing to your face. I mean, this is like an all-around, like all-time pathetic situation. Planned for a year, I'm gonna attempt this thing. I actually named my project, Jenna and I named the project The Impossible First, as an acknowledgement that this might be impossible, but actually in daring greatly to do really challenging things. If I fail, at least I'll learn something in the process. But I didn't expect to fail in the first hour. You know what I mean? Like I figured I'd like make some progress.
And had you practiced with the sled in simulated conditions?
As much as I could. I went to Greenland and crossed it before, but not with quite as much weight. And I had filled the sled, but like the snow conditions, you can't exactly know. Like it's not like you can like go simulate Antarctica like other places. And so like it didn't have, you know, everything, and there was actually a lot of loose snow, more so than typical in Antarctica, which created more friction on the bottom to begin, which was unexpected. And so it's not like I was ill prepared. It was just that like I got to this point where it was like, oh my God. And to make matters worse, like I'm struggling in the first hour and I'm thinking like, you know, misery loves company, right? You're thinking like, okay, well, this is ridiculously hard. If I look over, this other guy's probably like struggling too and fixing with his sled, whatever. No, what do I see? Captain Lou just like smooth and steady, just like like military march, like no problem, just like taking off, disappearing across the horizon. And I'm like, this is the worst, like my nightmare situation.
In retrospect, though, a great thing that he was there?
I think ultimately, you know, the end of the story, of course, is that I not only, you know, I'll go finish this.
Tell it as you would.
I pull up my satellite phone because I can't think of anything else to do, and I call Jenna at home, who's running all the operations.
Is there a time zone difference or not really?
Yeah. Oh, well, you can kind of pick your own random time zone, but I sit on Chilean time and she's on West Coast time, like U.S. So she's 5 hours earlier than me.
Okay. From the South Pole, you're in everyone's time
exactly.
zone.
It's the weirdest thing ever. You walk through every time zone in 1 second. So
okay.
I pick up my phone. It's 24 hours of daylight the whole time, so it's just a disorienting place. Technically, you could just not be on a 24-hour day if you didn't want to, because it's just the same always. Okay. But I pick up my satellite phone and call him to Jenna, and she's like, "Why are you calling me? It's a 1 hour. Like, what's wrong?" You know, basically. And I was like, "Yeah, so I think we named our project the right thing. It appears that it's impossible. I can't pull my sled." She's like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" She's like, "Yeah, I can't do it, and Lou's long gone." And so basically, she convinces me to make it to the first waypoint, which is about a half a mile away. And she's like, "Just get there, we'll regroup. You know, you'll feel like you made some progress, forget about Lou." And I think one of the more crucial turning points, there's a lot of ups and downs to this whole journey, obviously I don't have enough time to talk through them all, but is the next morning, like I'm a big believer, you know, I'm a really big believer in mantras, but I'm also a big believer in like, we are the stories that we tell ourselves. You know, that to me, that's like something that's really rung true for me for a long time. And in this moment, like I'm piling on, right? Like I'm like doubt, fear, and I'm like, "Colin, you're so stupid. Like you told everyone that you're gonna try to do this thing, and like, you know, it's one thing to like go for 30 or 40 days and, you know, fail, but like you've been out here for an hour, and like, you know, the New York Times just wrote this big profile on, you know, it's just like all the things. Like you're just like, how could I be so stupid? How could I be so, you're just like really piling on." Then I like kind of stop and I'm like, I could either continue to pile on. We're already every person, I don't care how successful you are, whatever, generally is kind of hard on themselves. I don't know, it's a human thing, but it's a shame that we are just really hard on ourselves sometimes. But I believe we're the story we tell ourselves. So I could sit there and be like, "You're a failure, you're an idiot, I'm alone, there's no one else to bounce ideas off of," all this kind of stuff. But I wake up the next morning, my alarm goes off, I'm trying to go, clean slate, forget about Lou. And I sit up straight in my chair, or in my tent. And these words come to me. I never said them before myself my entire life, but I go, "Colin, you're strong, you're capable. You're strong, you're capable." And it's like, I almost don't even believe the words that I'm saying, but I'm saying them so loud that like, just to like override this doubt and this negativity. And it ended up being what I said to myself every single morning for the next 54 days, no matter what. My alarm went off, and before I did anything, all the crazy chores, all the hard things I had to do every single day, "Colin, you're strong, you're capable. You're strong, you're capable." And just starting the day, you know, setting the tone for positive action and positive sort of outcomes made a huge difference for me I would like to say that I got out of the tent and it was so easy and I just pulled my sled for smoothly, and that's not at all what happened. The next 54 days were stupidly hard. I almost died several times and all sorts of crazy things happened, but ultimately I did complete the crossing. I passed Lou on the 6th day and stayed ahead of him the rest of the time, and ended up being the first person to ever in history complete this crossing.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.